Hello. Hey, everybody. This is Matt Kennedy. This is the Pop Sequentialism channel. And I wanted to do kind of an update to a previous video I did, which was called Is Art School a Scam? And I had a lot of people kind of reach out privately and ask me some questions about that. I appeared on a couple of other podcasts to discuss it sort of briefly. And before I say yes or no to that, and I think that I think some are and some aren't. I wanted to kind of just very middle of the road, neutral, lay out what things cost, not only to go to school, but once you graduate from school, how much a career in the arts is likely to cost you just to maintain employment. That's something that I don't think a lot of people realize when they embark on this endeavor. And so, yeah, so I think, again, when we think about illustrators or designers, we have an idea that, it's a job you can just sort of apply for. And honestly, a lot of employers, a lot of headhunters that actually staff companies who are going to be looking on sites like LinkedIn and in other sort of specialty jobs, a lot of them aren't even going to be looking there. They're going to be going to employment reps. But before we get into that, I just want to break down what it basically costs to get an art degree in 2024. Bearing in mind that all of these numbers are subject to change. Even hard numbers for a semester right now are very likely to be different by the time you graduate. But I went and looked on a couple of different college websites, and I zeroed in on Art Center College of Design in Pasadena, which is considered one of the best schools for illustration in America. I'm sure that the costs there are similar to schools like Otis, School of Visual Arts in New York, and other major art schools, maybe Art Institute in San Francisco. So I'm just going to lay it on you, just going to drop these numbers, directly at you. So to graduate with a bachelor's degree from Art Center, you have to go to 8 terms of 14 weeks. And so each one of those terms is $26,000, well, $26,543 per term for those undergrad years. So 8 terms at that cost adds up to about $212,344. That does not include ancillary fees. Those can be, certainly doesn't cover the cost of a loan. It does not cover housing. Now, housing in California in the Los Angeles area, on average, and this is not living by yourself, but probably in a roommate situation, is going to be between $1,500 and $1,800 a month. So calculating at $1,800 for Pasadena area, that's going to be about at $18,000 per year. Now, there's 2 ways you can graduate from Art Center. You can do 3 terms per year, or you can do 2 terms per year. If you do 3 terms, which means you graduate faster, and I think you get less of an education because you don't have time to actually absorb what you just learned. You've got a couple weeks off, and then you head directly back into school. That's going to be $54,000 minimum for 3 years and $72,000 in rent for 4 years. Now, if you want to go for a master's degree at Art Center, that's going to be an additional 5 to 7 terms. The cost for postgrad study is more than it is for undergraduate study. So it's $28,052 per term. So that's at 5 terms, $140,260. At 7 terms, that's $196,364. That's also an additional $36,000 to $60,000 in rent. Now, in order to even qualify for a master's degree at Art Center, you must have maintained a GPA of 3.97 or better to get that recommendation for the master's program. Now, so that all in, and that's, again, that does not cover the cost of books or art supplies, which I'm going to estimate is going to be $2,000 a year for books and $4,200 per year for supplies. So add that to the totals I'm going to give you right now. But the minimum cost for a bachelor's degree from Art Center is $266,344. And the minimum cost of a master's degree is $442,604. You can get some financial aid. You can, in some cases, get, not just loans, but grants. They're not easy to get. But think about that. So you don't need a degree, in theory, to get a job in the arts. But it is easier to find employment if you have a degree. And if you have a degree from a decent school, that can matter. It doesn't always matter. Now, let's compare those numbers to the public school option. So an excellent school with a really good art program, which happens to be a city college, is Santa Monica College. Now, this is going to blow your minds because we're going to go from, what did I tell you, $26,543 per term at Art Center. So Santa Monica College tuition, if you're a local, if you're a California resident, is $1,104 per year, not per term. So wrap your head around that for a second. There's going to be administration fees of $200, so over 4 years. So that's going to bring your total for a bachelor's degree from Santa Monica College to $4,616. Again, housing is going to be, because it's going to be 4 years, it's going to be $72,000 for housing. Your books are going to be $2,000 per year. Your art supplies are going to be in the neighborhood of $4,200 per year, probably. So adding all that together, you're still under $10,000. Well, that's not exactly true, because you're going to be looking at, so 4 years of $4,200 in art supplies, you're looking at $17,000, and then the extra $8,000 for 4 years of books on top of that. But you're still like way less than $266,000. If you're out of state and you go to Santa Monica College, it's a lot more. They charge $9,048 per year. So that times 4 is going to be $36,192. And then the housing, again, on top of that, $72,000. The cost of supplies across 4 years is going to be $16,800. The cost of books is going to be about $8,000. Now, the reason I bring up these options as opposed to a dedicated art school is because at a decent, like a really, really good local college, you have much more latitude to probably be able to get the classes and the teachers that you want. You're more likely to get a lot of attention from those teachers. And obviously it's way less expensive, but you can take a 4-year bachelor's degree from Santa Monica College and then apply for the master's program someplace else. So the master's program at UCLA, I believe, is $27,000 or $28,000 total. So not easy to get into by any stretch of the imagination, but you can take that and you can look at it. If you're going to school in Massachusetts, if you live in Massachusetts, there's going to be really, really good art programs at local schools without having to go to an Ivy League school or even, the Ivies, the little Ivies, and again, be able to transfer into a place like School of Visual Arts, Art Institute, or Cal Arts. A lot of people actually go to other schools and then grab their master's at Cal Arts. You may have to wait a semester, a year, to be able to get into those programs. But if you maintained a high GPA, the way that you would have to maintain a high GPA at Art Center, you'll make it into those programs. And let me tell you that the cost of living off campus at Cal Arts is a heck of a lot cheaper than Pasadena or Santa Monica, because you're up in Val Verde, Lancaster area, where it's super cheap for housing. And that can be true in a lot of the other really great places to get, post-grad degrees. So weigh those together. If you're thinking about going to art school, another option without going the degree route would be to take classes and learn your skill from a very gifted artist who takes on students. That cost can be all over the map. A school in Los Angeles that I would absolutely recommend is Gnomon, Gnomon. It's a school with some incredible painters as professors, people who work in the industry. So if you want to go for fine painting, they've got a couple of incredible instructors who can teach you fine painting over a 4 or 6 week course. You can go for video game designing or industrial design work and pick up classes from some very renowned people there as well. I have a feeling that those classes are probably less than $2,000 a piece. But check. I may be operating off of costs from back in the 20 teens when they used to drop off flyers and postcards outside of La Luz de Jesus Gallery when I was running that over in Los Feliz. But check out those options. There are, I'm sure, by searching just in Google for art instruction in your area, you can probably sign up to take one paid class from somebody and figure out if that's going to be beneficial to you. If your whole strategy is just to exhibit as an artist and not necessarily have a career in the arts, then you can learn a lot from those routes. You can learn a lot from just taking classes and get better at foundational painting. You can get better at specific aspects of artwork rather than going through the extra necessary classes in obtaining a degree. It's much cheaper and it can be as useful. I've exhibited people who went through the Gnomon program. I've exhibited people who had absolutely no formal art education but had peers. And I've exhibited a lot of people who have graduated from art school. Many of them are still paying off their student loans. So one of the ways that you can help pay off these huge loans with very high interest rates is by creating products and marketing them. So the better you get at marketing and the better you get at developing an audience for your work via whatever social media platform you choose, be it YouTube, be it Instagram. I'm a terrible example of this because I'm not staying on top of these things. I only post a video when I feel like I really have something that I want to say. I don't do a terrific job marketing any of that. But if I also don't have a career that depends on this. So as someone who is gainfully employed doing something else, I am privileged to be able to dedicate my free time in discussing and sharing what I've learned over a lifetime of working in and around the arts. If you want this without having that long route, and clearly if you're just graduating from college or if you're just embarking on this idea of a journey, then you don't have that. Then you want to start building up your presence online, developing a fan base, that type of thing. It doesn't have to be a huge fan base as long as they're loyal. If you're good at what you do, if you're good at marketing, I mean, a lot of the most successful artists I know aren't even necessarily particularly, I think, ostensibly technically gifted painters, but they're very good at marketing. So figure that out, and that can change a lot of things. That can change your entire trajectory. It can definitely keep you from paying off loans for 35 years. Because when you're looking at the cost of this education, so a master's degree costing $450,000, that's a nice house in Las Vegas. $450,000 will buy you a pretty nice place in Las Vegas. I'm sure in other states it'll buy you even more. In California, it'll buy you a little bit less, but New York certainly a little bit less. But that's a huge investment, and so to carry that, and you're going to be paying that off just like you would pay off a mortgage. It's going to be high interest rates, and by the time you've paid it off over 32 years, you'll have paid probably double of that amount. So you're talking, $800,000, $900,000. So that's something to think about before deciding to embark on a career in the arts. Now, a lot of successful exhibiting artists I know have careers either as educators or something that's sort of art adjacent, or something that's not related to the arts at all, and they just dedicate a lot of their spare time every day after work, on weekends, to getting really good they do and doing it. And that's sort of the most important aspect to all of this, is doing it. You learn at school, but that doesn't guarantee you a career. So you'll have a tremendous amount of debt if you go to a really, really good school, and there's no guarantee you even get a job. And a lot of the chairs, illustration chairs at certain schools, may not have even ever left that school. They may have never worked professionally outside of academia. And if that's the case, they're in no position to be giving you a job. They're going to only be relying upon hooking you up with alumni. And I've been to a lot of those, grad shows and things like that, and alumni do show up. They live in the area, but a lot of people don't. And so since there's not a lot of art, careers to be had outside of the entertainment business in Los Angeles, a lot of people move away. So the people that might be in the best position to hire you in the gaming industry might be in San Francisco or Seattle, or Canada, or overseas, or working remotely, from Pittsburgh or Ohio or upstate New York or Idaho. So, they're not necessarily going to fly in to meet students at a grad show. So relying upon alumni can be quite dangerous. Now, another way of looking at it is, if you've spent $450,000, you could probably have gone to medical school. And granted, you're going to have big student loans to pay off still, but you're basically guaranteed a career if you're going for some kind of surgery, that you'll be able to work and you'll be able to pay that off. And it's a very hard life. I'm not, downplaying a career in medicine and saying that it's by any means easy. Those residencies are very famously, drive a lot of people out of wanting to practice medicine after they go to medical school. But it can put you in a position to pay back that loan fast and then start establishing the rest of your life a lot quicker. And I'm telling you, art school is really not that much easier than medical school because of that trade-off, because there's no guarantee of you finding employment. There's no guarantee that just because you graduated that anybody thinks your artwork is any good. What you do gain from art school is a thick skin. Most classes have open crit, after a certain amount of time, where you work on a piece, you present it before the class, and not only does your instructor or your professor give you pointers, but before he gives his or her feedback, he's going to put it to the class, and the class are going to talk about your piece. So, these are people that didn't know you necessarily, that came from all over the world, and they're going to have really specific feedback. Some of it will be useful, some of it won't be. But what will happen is that you'll get a really thick skin to that type of criticism, and you'll be very good about weeding out the good critique and the bad critique and just putting it back into your work and getting better. If you can't take criticism, you will never have a career in the arts. That's just a fact. Nobody will hire you if you can't take direction. And when unless you're working for yourself in self-publishing, and that's absolutely a route that you can go through, and I would say in comics that you should do, that you are way better off working on your own project. You'll make more money, absolutely make more money that way. Even if you only if you sell 2,000 comics a month, you'll probably make more money if you're the publisher than if you work on a Marvel title that sells 120,000 comics at Marvel. So these are things to think about too, because you have to live. Hopefully, you got into the arts because you love them, and into a better degree, maybe you got it. I hope you got into it because you have to. That you have to do it. It's something that you cannot live without doing, and that to a degree can almost guarantee you a little bit more success if you're willing to accept criticism, filter it in the proper way, and put that back into your work in a way that makes sense and in a way that will help you. So let's say you've gone to school, you've gone to art school. Now you may be wanting to make the decision now, do I go for that master's degree? If possible. You don't get the GPA, maybe you don't get to go that route anyways. Is that master's degree worth it? Well, if you're going into education or academia, you kind of have to have a master's degree. With a bachelor's degree, it's even hard to teach a kindergarten art class in certain school districts where there's a tremendous amount of recent graduates. Certainly in Los Angeles, it's going to be a very competitive market. Actually, the entire state of California, unless you're really out in a small town, is going to be pretty competitive. And if you don't have a master's, then you probably have to have an exhibition history. So while you're going for your bachelor's, you're free to exhibit. You can paint or draw, whatever your medium is, and you can submit to art shows. You can get into exhibitions. You can sell work. You can start developing your career as an artist with patrons who are buying your work. You can form a relationship with a gallery. And whereas while you're doing your master's, sometimes you're not allowed to exhibit. During a doctorate program, you're almost never allowed to exhibit. So think about that. If you make your career from making paintings and you go to school for, 5 to 7 terms, 2 years, and you can't work, there's no money coming in. So you really have to have already planned for that to be able to take that time off, to be able to not paint and just learn, and to funnel that as an investment into your value with that diploma. Now, a lot of schools have a reputation. You hear this term, usually in the art business itself, diploma mills. A diploma mill is a school that just wants to bring in as many students as possible to make that tuition money and then graduate them as quickly as possible with no thought for how employable they are. That can be said for almost every art school, that they are, to some degree, diploma mills, because that have absolutely no future potential in the field that they just went to school to get a degree for. That's less common with almost any other degree program, with any other undergraduate program. Whether you go as a history teacher, going to learn history to become a history teacher, a lot of academic positions, yeah, you may be entering a crowded field. It may not be easy. You can probably find a job someplace, but in the arts, it's a lot more difficult. And you may, no matter what, after graduation, find yourself having to move to an area that you can afford to live in, that also has more potential for employment than the place that you want to live. And there's actually, sometimes that's a good thing and you don't even know it. One of the most successful and talented artists I know lives in Kansas, in a very small town. His overhead is almost nothing. He was able to pay back his student loans because he went to state schools in Ohio. And actually, Columbus had an amazing art program. I know a lot of artists who graduated from that. But and then when he does shows, he makes these large format sculptures, and he drives them from Kansas with a kind of U-Haul to California and delivers them to save on the cost of shipping his work, because it's very large and heavy. And he has a massive collector base, and he sells his work quite frequently. So while I don't think he envisioned necessarily living and launching a career in Kansas, it's become amazing for him. And he's also, being in the Midwest, able to take time off and fly out and do other things. So he can go and visit Europe, he can go and visit Asia frequently and not have to sweat, where the money's coming from, because he's making so much money selling his work. So that's not a common case scenario. He has hit the top of that level in the sort of pop surrealist end of the industry, certainly not to the blue chip level of artists at Gagosian, White Walls, Serpentine, places like that, but doing very, very well, certainly in that probably $250,000 to $500,000 a year net. So yeah, sometimes being forced to live in a different area can be a very, very good thing. So now that you've gone to school, and now whether you opt to go and get that master's degree because you want to go into academia, and by academia I mean you need a master's and sometimes a doctorate to get a job at a museum or at some kind of institution. Galleries galleries want salespeople. Galleries want people who can sell the artwork and speak intelligently about it. So whether you have a degree or don't have a degree is going to mean a lot less than whether or not you can sell a painting to somebody who walks in off the street and then find leads to reach major collectors to get the work of these establishing artists into those same collections. So to that degree, if that's your route, you probably want to go to school for sales and then operate your business model around how to achieve the career that you want. That's going to go a lot further for you than art school will. And again, you can take art history classes on the side and not be saddled with a $500,000 in debt, $250,000 in debt. But we'll say you've done it. We'll say you've gone to art school and now you're about to enter the real world. And this came up, and the reason why I'm actually doing this video is I'm in a Facebook group that is connecting writers and artists. And I've noticed that a lot of the posts in that group have kind of gone off the rails. There's a lot of people who are kind of like, rate my work, and they're really not ready to work. If you're at that point where you're like, how is my work? You're not ready to work on a comic book with anybody. You're not ready for publishing. You're not ready for the industry to whatever degree that you enter it at. But, there are writers trying to find artists, and there are publishers as well. And someone posted, and it was a pretty controversial post in this group, that they were doing art representation and they take a 30% fee, and everybody kind of lost their minds over it. And that's because a lot of the people in this group, some are working comic artists, but they're not really commercial artists. And so I'm going to break down what kinds of agency fees and commissions you can look forward to if you are a working commercial artist. This can also be true for graphic designers. But so I've made some notes here, so I'm going to be referring to them. I apologize. And I think, and what's really important about this, and why I think everybody in that group got so upset, and I was kind of like, okay, I've never heard of this person, so what do you bring into the table? And I think I posted I think my single post initially was just a curse word, but people have a kind of a layperson's understanding of agents and commissions because of the entertainment business. Now, some of you know and some of you don't, but now you'll all know. I had a pretty decent career as a working actor in my 20s and into my mid 30s. I did a lot of TV commercials. I got sent out occasionally on pilots. I ended up shooting 5 or 6 pilots that all went nowhere, and for various different reasons. And when the last one kind of went nowhere, my interest in being on camera had really waned at that point. I was already writing a lot for that show, for one of those shows. I had already been hired as a rewrite guy from a few people that were writers themselves who were too busy to work, but they were getting offered work. And writers and actors are similar in that we're all a very superstitious bunch, and there's a real kind of feeling of imposter syndrome, where you're like, you don't believe in your ability. And especially, if you're not doing like serious dramatic work, or you're not doing theater or something like that, where you can get that immediate response, like you kind of know in a live theater setting if you're going over, the way that a comedian knows, the way that a musician knows. But, and the way that they draft, a good comic is done a lot of, work, a lot of crowd work, a lot of joke work, a lot of writing their material and practicing it, and then getting up on stages and bombing to get it good. Musicians also are working with their peers, creating music and getting better by playing with better people, by practicing, incessantly, and taking any opportunity that they can to get on stage. Now, artists are similar, we'll say visual artists are similar to a degree, but they're different from musicians, because a musician can send a tape, as an audition to a band. And like pretty much right off the bat, if you're going to be a good fit musically, then you kind of show up, and you're also going to be living in the same town if you're going to be in a band together. I mean, unless you're very well known and it's a project, and there are certainly people who send their recordings, digitally, across the world. But in most settings, bands are going to be local bands that are trying to become national bands and international bands. And so you're going to be living in the same city. You're going to be spending a lot of time with these people. So it becomes a personality thing as well. But there's an expectation and an immediate recognition of whether somebody's good or not. Like, or at your level, I should say, not even whether they're good, but whether or not they're at your level so that you can all play together. In the arts, when you're hiring people, you may have seen some of their work, but when you're hiring to do the work, you have to get that work back from them. There's a process, there's a wait. There's that point from which you pay them to do the work, and then they deliver the work. And, by delivering through the internet and not having an agent in between, both of you, the person hiring the artist and the person doing the artwork, are in danger of getting ripped off. So if you're working on spec as an artist and you do the work and they disappear, I mean, you have a recourse later to sue them if the book comes out. It's going to cost you more money. So, I mean, the last thing anybody probably wants to do who didn't get paid is spend more money to get paid, and probably not a lot if you were agreeing to that situation anyway. So it's really a loss. And that bad person, that bad, publisher knows that. So they're going to take advantage of that. Maybe they're publishing in a different part of the world, and even copyright laws aren't necessarily going to be obeyed, or they're going to be impossible to track down. But the opposite is also true. If you're paying an artist for work, you're at their schedule. They deliver when they deliver, no matter what you've agreed upon. Because what's the penalty? Like if you've got something that you need, like say you have a publishing schedule, you have everything set up, you've got the scripts in, you've got someone working on one issue, you get somebody else working on a different issue of a different comic, you're trying to set up a publishing schedule, and if one of those artists is late delivering, you're screwed, because you have obligations with distributors to get those books in on time. Sometimes there's advances, rarely, but there's definitely built into that financial plan a schedule by which money comes in. And so even if you don't lose money, if you have a story that's not finished, then you lose because you're at the mercy of that story being finished, or at risk of finding another artist with the same style who can finish whatever pages you've received that thus far. But usually, a writer and an artist are looking to have a partnership that continues beyond one job. And you just don't know, if you don't know these people, whether they're flaky or reliable, dependable or not, scammers or not half the time. And this becomes a really dangerous thing in the publishing aspect of the art world. So this really is specifically in that comic book creator relationship. But it can also be animators or whatever, spec game creation, you name it. That's always a risk, unless you go through an agency. or an agent. And so that 30%, which sounded insane to everybody in that, comic artists and media writers group, is actually not that uncommon. It's high. But like if you were to go to work for an ad agency, ad agencies, all these sort of art reps that are like corporate art reps are the equivalent of ad agencies that just, instead of handling necessarily a pitch, they're handling artists. Much like an acting agent, they're going to be handling the artist instead of the talent. But what almost everybody knows about actors and agents is that an agent commission for the Screen Actors Guild, a very powerful, very wealthy union, has limited agents commissions to 5%. And to work with the Screen Actors Guild managers, who do not have to be, most managers don't care if they work with the Screen Actors Guild, are usually limited to 10%. But a manager can take whatever they want. They can put a contract in front of somebody who doesn't know any better, and they can sign away 50%, 70%. You see it in the music business all the time. But usually it's going to be, 5% for an agent and 10 to 20% for a manager. And that percentage is going to depend on what services they deliver. A lot of managers buy clothes. A lot of managers buy travel accommodations and hotel rooms. So there is an investment on the manager side in the talent that is worth the value that talent is paying back. And contracts can be negotiated by managers and agents. Some actors have agents and managers. So, and then they have stylists and they've got publicists and all these other things. So when you see that Tom Cruise got $10 million for a movie, yeah, that's a crazy amount of money. Now break that down between his agent, a manager, a producing partner, a stylist, a publicist. Like there are a lot of people taking a little piece of those checks. It's similar in a way to athletes who pay huge fees, not just to their agents, with that can generally be 20%, but also back into the union, which takes a huge chunk of their money. The agency fees in the Screen Actors Guild are pretty low. There is no guild for artists. There is no union for artists. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are some, but by and large, for fine artists, there aren't. For most people working in the Korean arts, there aren't. And those unions don't have much power. So Screen Actors Guild has a ton of power. So they've been able to negotiate down the industries that support their members. But in the illustration field, you can expect for an ad agency type representative to take somewhere between 20 and 30%, like I say, but that's also what you will call unentitled income. So those places get artists jobs that those artists cannot get on their own. And the agency also already knows what that artist's rate is before they pitch them to a client. So they may have numerous different artists at different rates at the same agency. So a company like Magnet Reps can take up to, I think they do take up to 30% from certain illustrators. Now, a lot of illustrators have this idea that they'll work for one of these big agency reps for a couple of years, and then after they amass this incredible client base, choose not to re-sign. I'm not sure. I'm sure that these agencies have a non-compete clause where for a certain amount of time afterwards, you are not allowed to work with the companies that they got you employment with. And it's probably anywhere from 2 to 10 years. But say by some miracle that you're able to negotiate when you sign the contract, because you're so good and so high in demand, a 1-year non-compete. So you're so busy, you're doing so much work, you were in demand by so many clients that you had to turn down some clients to take work from another client who was more steady. And so you did work for one client, but you hadn't done work for that client in a long time. So that non-compete may be interpreted as being from the last time you actually worked for them, not necessarily the agency. Again, depending upon how your contract was written, what state you're in, all these things are all very important factors. Read your contract before you sign anything. Have a lawyer read the contract and not the lawyer for the company that you're going to work for. Very important to understand these things, know what you're signing. But say you had no non-compete clause. So you work for, I don't know, Warner Brothers through one of these agents and one of these agencies. And so after you choose not to re-sign your contract, not to extend, you pick up the phone, you call the person that you were working with directly, because a lot of times the artist is going to be working directly with the art director at that paid your agency to work with you, and who you've kicked 20 to 30% of every commission, every job back to, and said, hey, I'm no longer with such and such reps. I'm looking for work. And then they may hear, oh, wow, I really wish you'd talked to me before you decided to leave. We have an exclusive contract with that agency beyond what your non-compete is, that we cannot work with any artist for 5 or 10 years after they leave that, or we can't use any of the artists on their roster, or they have an exclusive deal, or they only want to work with that agency for the reasons that I outlined. That sometimes an artist who can be, completely on time and completely reliable and really good when they're with an agency, when they don't have that pressure, they become more aloof and they don't deliver on time. They don't become as reliable. And a lot of clients have seen this and just don't want to go through that bullshit. So you may find that it's that unentitled income is unentitled income forever. That if you want to continue working with that type of client, that you have to stay with those types of agencies and those types of representatives. So that's the absolute top. That's like the most ridiculous, fee structure that you're going to see, but you're going to get good paying jobs and regular work. So what other kind of relationships are there? Well, actually, it's not the highest. The highest fee is a gallery. Most fine art galleries take 50% of the retail price of the artwork that they sell, which means that if you have a painting in an art gallery and it's priced $2,000, in the event that it sells, you get $1,000 and the gallery gets $1,000. Now, it doesn't seem fair because you had to pay for, we'll say, the paint and the frame, all that stuff, all your materials, and the gallery didn't. Well, a gallery may take 50%. At the end of their cost analysis, they're lucky if they get to keep 10% of that, because they've got rent, they've got overhead, they've got the cost of a brick and mortar gallery, a physical gallery. On top of that, they've got the cost of an employee being there all day long during business hours. Now, whether that's the gallery owner themselves or their spouse or family, that's still something that costs money. If they choose to do it for free because it's their gallery, you still have to calculate that they wouldn't have done this for minimum wage. So double minimum wage, and figure that's an expense of their time. And honestly, I don't know a single gallerist that only works gallery hours. They're working around the clock. When I was a gallerist working for a gallery that I did not own, I spent a lot of time at home working on stuff. I was following up clients, constantly looking for new talent. That fell outside of the hours that I got paid for, and then when I had my own gallery, there was a little bit of crossover where I worked for one gallery. I had my own gallery. My entire life was basically dedicated to working with artists from one or both. So my free time was none. And most of my free time, as a factor of being in that trade, was going to other galleries and other openings to see other artists. Some artists may, they go to gallery openings looking not necessarily to show with that gallery, but knowing that other gallerists go there, they get to speak with other working professionals and say, hey, I saw that you had, a really good show up at this other gallery. how is it working with them? And that artist may be helping to pitch your gallery. So if you show up, it's a much easier conversation. I think it's in bad taste for an artist to approach, a gallery owner at somebody else's opening. But there's nothing wrong with being seen, and going back after the opening during a regular exhibition day and having a conversation with the director or the owner. But it is in bad taste to try and pitch yourself when somebody else is the person that should be getting the attention. There's also, I think, another aspect to all of this is, on top of the fact that there's that cost of overhead, there's also the cost of advertising. There's the cost of putting on receptions. There's all the other overhead, the cost of electricity, the cost of the hanging mechanisms, painting the walls, spackling the walls, the maintenance of that space, but also the maintenance of websites and other ancillary things that aren't necessarily part of that physical thing. So a lot of galleries that had to go online during the pandemic, some of them, because they have that massive collector base, again, this is unentitled income. You as an artist don't have an automatic road to those buyers just because you're an artist. You have a road to those buyers because that gallery has featured you, that gallery having a reputation, having been in business for a certain amount of years. They know that the prices are established. Every gallery I've ever run, prices were posted. There was no mystery. It was completely transparent. A lot of galleries don't post prices. That's much more common in the blue chip world. Various reasons that I think they're a little fishy, but I understand that they're necessary in some cases. And it's to maintain the value of paintings. If you showcase that someone's work is available and hasn't sold, then it may signal that that work isn't wanted, and that can hurt the value of their previously sold pieces. It hurts the upward mobility of an artist's retail pricing. But by and large, I'm a huge proponent of transparency and just having the prices, showcasing what's available and what isn't, and then after a year, taking those prices down. You can maintain a record if you want to. I don't see much use in it. What happens is that other galleries kind of look at your pricing and they set their prices by it if they get in the work, when really they should be calling you up and having a conversation with you about it. You'll get people that charge for appraisals, and rather than them actually doing work, they just pull up somebody's website and they've got the prices right there, and they charge somebody $150 to tell them what they could have learned for free if they knew to check out your website. So, I mean, you don't want to necessarily empower what I would call, the predatory side businesses that are built around the art business. So, like I say, that gallery may take 50% of the retail price. They don't get to keep it frequently. And again, not every show sells out. Most shows, you're lucky if you sell a third or, somewhere between a quarter and half of the pieces considered generally successful, depending upon the amount of pieces. And you hope that it's not just the cheapest pieces. So you want to build that into your modeling. But, it's frequently a loss for a gallery to show unestablished talent. So that's why that price exists. Now, they may help you work commissions. And in that case, the commissions are more expensive than your on the wall gallery price because someone is paying you to do something specifically for them that they want. You can limit, that to an idea or a pose and not let them too much into the process. I don't know too many painters that are very comfortable with allowing a patron to art direct them completely through the entire process. That's much more common actually in, say, comic book work. But in the fine art world, it's much less common. A lot of painters don't do commissions. And so when they do open up a commission list, it's something special. It's probably going to cost you double what the cost of the piece on the wall is. It should at least cost you 150% of the cost of a similar size piece. Otherwise, those buyers will stop buying the work on exhibition and they'll just wait and try and get a commission. So you want to make it hurt a little bit in that pricing. And in those cases, the gallery isn't necessarily entitled to half. They're generally entitled to half of what the retail would be, and then the artist gets the rest. Anywhere between 25 to 50% of the actual established retail price, meaning that the artist gets all of what they would normally get for a gallery piece and sometimes a little bit more. So that's something that you can only get through being represented by an art gallery because they have an existing clientele. They have people that buy paintings from them, if not every show, then several shows a year. And they're looking to expand because the artist that they buy from maybe shows once every 2 years. So that creates a large, you know, a large base for a new artist to be able to establish new clients. It's bad form to continue to do commissions without kicking back to the gallery if they introduced you to that client. But there are certainly situations where you leave a gallery and you have new representation, and then selling to the people that have supported you is not unethical in any way. But it's always a good idea to have those conversations with a gallery that are going to cause a bad reputation to develop or to hurt the reputation that you have. And gallerists should also be having these conversations and forcing these conversations with the artist so that nothing is assumed, so that everything is completely crystal clear about what is expected, what is not allowed, what percentages there are for commissions versus wall pieces, if there's a discount possibility for someone buying more than one piece, all of these things that should all be articulated, if not in the contract, at least verbally. So, and you should always have a contract when exhibiting. So now beyond that, there's the second layer, we'll say the less costly aspects of the support business for artists. So after a gallerist and after an industry rep or an ad agency, you know, those unentitled incomes, there's another rung. There are retail art reps. So retail art reps are really common in the comic art world. And so if you like the art of whoever's doing an X-Men comic or a Batman comic, they have a retail art rep. So they got paid to do the artwork by a client, Marvel, DC, whoever, and they still have the pencil page because that doesn't become the property of the publisher, just the intellectual property depicted on that page. So, and this is very important for people who aren't artists to understand, that buying artwork does not give you the right to reproduce it in any way, shape, or form. That you need a contract and written permission from an artist to do those types of things. Even if you get oral permission and you don't have it written down, and you make a t-shirt or a series of t-shirts or an album cover of the art of a painting that you bought, you can get sued by that artist. They can change their mind if you don't have, you know, a written agreement. Oral contracts are no good. So you want to make sure you have it in writing. But these retail art reps get these pages after the publisher is done with them. The comic has been published so that they're not, you know, spoilers, and they sell them to the general public. Now, very few of these retail art reps have brick and mortar locations. They're usually selling online or they're doing shows. So they go to comic book conventions and they've got these books full of artwork. I don't have one in easy reach, but I'm sure anybody watching this channel, watching this show and the replay are very familiar with these art books. And they have sleeves and they fit in, and you pull the artwork out and you sell it. They're marked and they go for anywhere from, I mean, I've seen inexpensive pages for $15, $80, and there are some people that are getting $8,000 more for each published page, and not even necessarily covers. Certain art reps have a very exclusive clientele whose work is very valuable, and they have a waiting list of people waiting to buy their published work. They'll do an art drop on one day, and a lot of times all the pages sell out. Most other retail art reps who are getting their artwork directly from the artists are getting 20 to 25% of the retail price. That's usually the top. That's not to say that there aren't people willing to take less, but it's dangerous because I don't think that people willing to take that small amount of a commission off of the sale are going to be doing much for you. They're not going to be building up your reputation. If anything, they're going to be keeping your retail prices low. And what you want is, if you're working on a hot book, or if you become an Eisner Award winning artist, or just a really very popular fan favorite, then you're going to count on that retail rep to book commissions for you. And that structure may be the reverse of that structure in an art gallery, where they take a little bit more, because again, it's an unentitled sale. Although there's an argument to be made that if you're a published comic book artist, that you are basically entitled to almost every sale, because your work is being published and that's doing all the work for you. And that's another reason why retail art reps don't take so much. But commissions are a little bit more work. It requires a lot more work on behalf of your rep, because they have to take payments for you and then pay you. And these are almost always commission, like you work on a commission sale, or I should say a consignment type arrangement. So you send them the pages, they don't send you money, they keep the pages and they sell them to someone who buys them, and then they pay you for each page as it sells. And if you ever need to get one or more pages back from them after an amount of time, they'll send it to you. Or you can meet them at a convention and work side by side, and then the deal may change. But by and large, there are contracts in these relationships too that stipulate that they get every page in the comic. So otherwise, an artist could sell the cover themselves or sell a splash page themselves, and then stick that retail art rep with all these panel pages, which are far less in demand. And that's not something that they're going to want to do. In some cases, just to have a lot of material to be able to sell, they may be willing to to bear the burden of having a lot of these panel pages left over. And frequently what will happen is that they'll find somebody who's trying to complete a book and make a deal, or just offer an entire book for sale, knowing that there's maybe 2 or 3 splash pages. The cover is generally sold separately, but there's the option for someone to buy the entire original artwork for a book. That's becoming much more common now than it ever used to be. Now, industry art reps, they don't generally charge as high a commission as an ad agency, because industry rates of comic publishers are fairly uniform. So this would be the equivalent of an ad agency rep, where as an illustrator, you get representation from one of these industry reps, and they don't sell your original artwork to consumers. They sell you as an artist to a publisher. And so those commissions are generally as low as 10 to 15% and as high as 20 to 25%. And they're probably between 15 or 20%. And that can be negotiated if you become hot. So if like your career really takes off, in order to renew your contract, they may be willing to take a slightly lower percentage, because you're getting more offers than you can maybe necessarily fulfill. And that's another big issue with comic book illustration, is that it's slow and it doesn't pay well. Like you don't get paid a lot by Marvel or by DC. If you're working for a publisher like Image, then they're really just a ghost publisher. Like you're, or the writer or the team, are paying to have that book published. They take money from retailers. They kick back after they deduct the cost of publication, but you're paying for the publication of that book. So you're really the publisher under this sort of banner or umbrella, if you will, of this other publisher. Then there's other indie publishers, like Dynamite, who are freelance employers. He'll pay a specific rate for a writer, for an interior artist, for a cover artist, and but there's usually a holdback to when that goes to press, and then maybe 3 months after, because those publishers aren't getting paid immediately, and there are returns. So they have to wait to get paid. So you have to wait to get paid. So it's not uncommon to wait up to 6 months to get paid as a comic book illustrator. And that's why, again, like if you're going to go through all that, then you should be in a position where you're making the bulk of the money. I understand that in order to build yourself up to the point that most of the hobby knows who you are, it's beneficial to take a job at a DC or a Marvel. If you're hot artist and you've got a really good writer, I would recommend going to take that Image deal and be kind of self-publishers under the umbrella of Image, or become a regular cover artist if you're a really gifted cover artist, working for all these indie publishers, be it Zenescope or Dynamite or whatever. But if you are working on a Marvel book, you're more likely to build up a big fan base that follow you. At least a portion of them will follow you to your own creator-owned book. And it's good to keep a toe in sometimes at one of the big publishers and to work your publishing schedule around the publishing schedule for your book. Whether if you're the guy on Spider-Man, then it's good to have your book hit the same week as Spider-Man. So when those readers come in to buy Marvel Spider-Man book, your book that you made yourself, that you get a much higher compensation for, is on the racks that same week, and they can buy both. And the comic shop is going to push that on you. Like, they're going to know if you're a regular comic book shop and you're reading a book by, Olivier Coipel, and he's doing Thor, but he's also doing this other indie book, he's going to bring that to your attention because you're probably going to want to buy it. The same is also true of writers. And actually, writers are more likely to have that same hook into their reader base at a major publisher and then their indie books. That's the story, and that's generally what people latch onto. If they're just following the artwork, that love affair can die down a little bit unless that artist is working with consistently really, really great writers. And I've heard in a lot of groups that the writers feel a little bit disrespected because they don't get as much credit since it's not, the visual form. Well, if you read the credits on any comic book movie, the people who are most likely to get a little chunk of change are the guys that wrote the characters, that created the characters that way, not necessarily the people who designed their costumes, which 9 times out of 10 are going to get changed on screen anyways. So if a breakout character becomes, a zeitgeist character, the writer stands a better chance of making more money off of that. Although, as we know, with the contracts as they've been for the last 50 years or so, writers or artists aren't getting a huge kickback from these major corporations that are making billions of dollars off of the work that they did in monthly comic books. So that pretty much covers it. So, like I say, to do a quick rundown of these ancillary sidemen, we'll say, industry reps, ad agencies, any amount up to 30%. Industry art reps, 10 to 25% generally, and usually in the middle, 15 or 20. So as an agent that represents talent. So we'll say an industry talent agent. Then beyond that, you have your retail art reps who take anywhere from 10 to 25%. Unless they're really locked into major clients, I'm sure they can take more. There's also another aspect of that, which is that some art reps buy outright all the artwork from the artist. So the artist gets paid upfront, probably less than they would make if they had to wait for it, but they're getting a lump sum at once, and that's extraordinarily rare. But there are a couple of retail art reps that work that way because they know they have buyers for it and they can do auctions. So what that means is if I pay out of pocket for an entire book, you are no longer entitled to any additional money. So I don't have to lock myself into a 20 to 25% commission. I can sell it for twice what I paid for it. I can sell it for 3 times what I paid for it. Over time, an artist will notice that and probably get a little bit upset about it and either threaten to leave or negotiate points on anything above a certain percentage. But if you're getting paid in full, that's a gift horse that most people don't look in the mouth. So that's another aspect to the retail art rep relationship with an artist. If they do pay out of pocket, they have buyers for it. That doesn't mean if you leave them that you get those buyers. And it doesn't mean that you leave them for another rep that they have that same relationship with those same buyers. And in fact, some buyers don't like to buy from certain people. And so that may absolutely kill your relationship with, one of your patrons. So that's something to be, to consider, because I don't think artists consider that stuff. Like I say, they just look at the percentages that they're paying out of pocket for, or not out of pocket, but like an earned percentage off of, their cut, and they get a little upset about it. I remember, artists that were fresh out of art school having a big problem with the 50% split with a gallery and thought they could negotiate it. And it's once you do that, it's mayhem. So you have to say no and just let another gallery deal with them if they're willing to deal with them. What'll generally happen is they'll end up going to a gallery that will take less percentage, who cannot sell their work. It poisons their first exhibition, keeps their price low, and then they try and circle back to the gallery that wanted to show them that they turned down because they were taking 50%, and that gallery may tell them to go jump in the lake. But it's there's certain sort of hard established rules that just don't change. But once you get to a certain point, you can sell directly. If you can't make that leap from, say, a B level gallery to an A level gallery, and most establishing artists are going to be at a D or a C level gallery. But if you're coming out of art school and you get a recommendation from a professor who has in a gallery that they work with, then you're probably already starting at the C plus B minus level. So if you do start to amass a client base, you will be able to sell directly. You'll be approached on Instagram. Just don't undersell your gallery. Don't offer work directly for less than the retail price that a gallery would ask for it, unless you've had a show and it didn't sell and it's a year later and you've made an agreement that it can be sold for 25% less, or that it can be sold for 30% less if they buy 3 pieces. Something that maintains your price point, because you don't want to poison your retail price. It's better to put those pieces in the closet, do a new show that does well, and then take them out and have them to sell again at full retail, than to poison your retail price at market by selling it cheap just because you want that money now. I mean, as an artist, you're constantly investing in yourself. It's, sweat equity that sometimes you have to take that loss. And that's why most artists need a big support system. They have to have family, whether it's a blood relative or a spouse or a girlfriend or boyfriend, someone who is helping them with their marketing or carrying most of the bills, if they're exclusively, if they're only working in the arts, and get used to having leftover work. I mean, it's a rare commodity to be constantly out of work. In comics, it can happen that someone who wasn't selling anything for years gets on a hot book and now all of a sudden everything sells. You saw that with Jock. Jock had done the DC comic The Losers and had done Scalped, and there were certain pages that would sell and covers that would sell. And when Jock booked Batman, working with Scott Snyder, the book was so hot that everybody wanted Jock's work. His prices went crazy. Everybody went back and picked up all that less expensive, previously unwanted artwork, and there's not a whole bunch of his work available in the market anymore. But that's super rare, and it's unsustainable. Just because someone's hot now doesn't mean they're going to be hot forever. There are peaks and valleys in this hobby. I mean, people can get canceled for doing stupid things. If you say something unpopular, there's going to be a comeuppance. If you say something that is hurtful or stupid, you may be held accountable for that. And so be aware that so much of your career is tethered to how people feel about you, the same way that it's how they feel about your artwork. And it may be that they like your art because it's art of a character that they like, or it's art in a book by a writer that they like. And so your fan base may go away if you stop working with that writer or that character or even that publisher. So it's a very fickle business, when it comes to illustrating comic books. It's a little bit less so in the other aspects of the commercial art world, which can be doing covers of magazines, doing spot illustrations. For a long time, spot illustrations were going away. People were concerned that AI was going to eliminate those jobs. That happened for a little bit, and I think that most publishers are now very anti-AI in the creation of artwork. So because the public opinion seems to be against it. In the gaming business, that's probably a little bit more common. Certainly in special effects, in films, AI is going to be a big part of that. Those people those jobs that were sent overseas because they were so inexpensive, those are going to disappear. They're still going to need people to do the prompts. That's a whole other conversation. I think that if you are an artist and you want to use AI, just using your own work to help you do layout, that's not bad. That's a tool. That's what it should be used for. I mean, I was hoping that AI would do the things that we don't want to do, like sweep our floors, and clean houses, paint houses, build things, not the stuff that we like to do, which is to be creative. But I don't think that the initial big fear about AI taking over publication is really much to worry about. Whenever someone has gotten caught using artificial intelligence to enhance a piece for publication, a comic, they've been absolutely excoriated. So it does seem to be something the community does not like, does not want. So there's a lot of options, but I think that there's more options if you don't just do comics, if you do a lot of other things. And if you are going to do comics, that you develop your own characters or work with a writer who has their own characters and get a piece of that character and keep that partnership going. Don't expect that you can do one issue and be a part of that payday from here on out if they have to hire other people to keep doing the comic, because that writer's going to keep writing it. So when approaching a prospective creative partner, be very upfront about what each of you wants from that partnership, and work with each other, because together you'll accomplish much more than you will alone. And that's why peer groups are important. And that's, you don't get to be a better artist if you don't have the competition and the friendly back and forth with other people who do what you do. You don't become a better in a vacuum. So you have to, stress you work in the same muscles, you work in technique, and getting better is what gets you to a higher payday because your work will be more appreciated. So I hope this has been helpful. I hope that, that it helps elucidate what the cost can be going into a successful career, but it doesn't have to be those costs. And there are absolutely always exceptions to every rule. What I outlined aren't even a rule. It's just different ways that things tend to happen, common ways that they happen, and what it costs to reach that common point where your example is comparable to most other examples in that industry. So take all that, absorb it, think about it, use it as a tool, and look for ways around the examples that I described to see if there are better ways in. And if that other way works for you, then that can be your way. If that other way doesn't cost as much, great. Sometimes that other way may end up costing you more via other expenses that I haven't outlined, that aren't really so common that they were worth mentioning in this same collection of information. But, again, why people are good to use third parties in negotiating a work as a writer with an artist, or even hiring artists to do commissions, is that artists and writers can both be flaky, they can be lazy, they can be poor at communication. And because there are so many that are, those who aren't are automatically assumed to be, because of the sheer volume of unprofessional peers. I've heard nightmare scenarios from collectors who have waited years to get a commission completed from an artist after they were paid directly in full, and they have no way of getting it back except to go to court. And ideally, that's not why you hired them to do the piece. You want the piece. But if you booked it through a rep or an agent, there's a much higher chance that it will get completed, and will get completed in a timely fashion, because they have to wait for that money. They're not going to get paid until they complete it and deliver it, and then they get paid. So that's motivation. That's going to lead them to do the right thing. And then they don't have to worry about you not paying, because you've paid that third party, usually halfway through, then half before completion, but sometimes in full. And then again, if you paid half and you disappear, well, now they have a piece that they can sell. They get to keep that half and sell it for full price to somebody else. So, there's a really good reason to have these middlemen, and a lot of these middlemen earn those commissions. It's not like they're sitting on their butts doing nothing. I mean, it is work dealing with the people that don't want to deal with directly. And emails and messages at inappropriate times of the day and night. And you want to have that separation, because fans can be stalkery, And so not having a direct line of communication is good so that it doesn't lead to any, uncomfortable, awkward, icky situations. And a lot of people would happily pay 10 to 20% of the cost of something to not have to deal with that kind of nonsense. So bear that in mind too. If you've liked what you heard, if you learned something, please like, comment, subscribe. If you want to, help us out financially, you can always gift us. You can always give us a little token of appreciation. Or what I would prefer is that you go to the popsequentialism.com website, find something that you like and buy it, so that it's really just a reward for you that helps me to be able to keep doing this, because it keeps me buying more artwork that I get to talk about, and have more other interesting interactions with artists and writers and publishers that then I can come back to you and talk about. Again, this isn't something I do really very regularly, but I thought that this was an important subject that I hadn't really seen anybody talk about. I hadn't seen anybody really talk about the actual prices of what these things can cost. And so I hope that's been helpful. And, by all means, hit me up if you have any questions. Visit the website. And I hope to see and talk to you all again soon. Thanks.